I'm Rosa Mendez, and I'm here at the #1 Long Island broadcast, Monty and Pharaoh. I had the best time ever!
Hey, listen, Daddy, you're listening to the #1 broadcast, Monty and Pharaoh, Daddy, in Long Island. The best pro wrestling broadcast of all time, I think.
Jimmy, I got to tell you, man, it feels good to be back on YouTube. It was quite disappointing what happened to us, but we bounced back fairly quickly.
Well, what else would we do? We're almost at 5,000 subscribers.
Well, speaking of that, man, we need more members.
Okay.
What do you think we need to do to get the people of those 5,000 subscribers to come on and join the team as a Monty and the Pharaoh member?
Nudity is out of the question. Any other ideas?
I don't know, man. I don't know. But what I do have a few ideas.
Well, just like Prel, they should tell 2 friends, and they could tell 2 friends, and so on and so on. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. Check out all our content.
But that's, you know what? That's why you're the star of the show, because guess what? Members get special content. Even we spoke about it. Pharaoh came to me one day and he goes, man, what's the deal? I can't even watch some of these videos because I'm not a member. And I said, there you go, Pharaoh. You got to be a member because this is what the members get. They get free content
Nice.
that none of the other fans that watch this show get.
That's right.
You get free autographs from some of these wonderful stars that come in, right?
Nice.
All you do is you go to the MNP webpage, or right, our own page, and shoot us an email and say, hey, man, I want a picture of Tommy Rich. I want a picture of whatever. And boy, that's on its way.
We give them their choice.
That's right.
We rock.
We do rock.
And you need to rock, too. Join.
Well, anyway, we want to thank our guest. Welcome, Sal Corrente. Sal, how are you, buddy?
I'm okay. How about you?
All right. I thank you for joining us. We're really looking forward to having this discussion with you. How's everything been going?
Fine and dandy down here in South Florida. Loving the warm weather.
What's the temperature, Sal, if I may ask?
I don't know. It was in the 80s, but I
beautiful.
don't pay enough attention. I only pay attention when it gets too low.
There you go.
Sal, have you always lived in Florida, or are you originally from up here in New York?
No, I'm born and raised in Yonkers, New York, and then Nikita Koloff moving down to Charlotte. Stayed there about 12 years, and then I came down to Florida.
Now, how did that go about? How did you build a relationship with Nikita that he moved you?
Well, Nelson Royal was starting a territory, and Nikita got me a tryout with the first TV tapings he did at Mooresville High School in North Carolina. So I drove down for that, and I was just supposed to do a match or two and just to, let them look at me. And whoever was supposed to referee didn't show up, so I did all 3 hours of the TV. And that's how that started. But I became friends with Nikita through Ivan, and we hit it off pretty well right away.
Now, you're almost like a hidden secret in the wrestling world, right? How did you start your career? Did you start off as a wrestler, as a fan? How did it come about?
Well, there's a guy who partnered with me in the Wrestle Reunion events that I ran in 2005. Anthony Attanasio. We grew up in the same street in New York, and he ended up meeting a guy through. He had a refrigeration repair company. He still does, much larger now. But he went and did a job for a guy in our community who used to go down to TVs and arenas and take photos. He showed, he told him what he does. He told him about me. He said he could bring me to the house. That's how I found out the TV tapings were done in Allentown and Hamburg. And I started going down there with those guys. And my first TV was the one where Buddy Rogers came back to the company. And right there that day, I started doing security at the back door in Allentown and in Hamburg on the heel side. And, never looked back from there. And then, knew a lot of the guys, but met the Wild Samoans through these guys. Dominic Marcello was the guy's name, and Mike DeVanzo. Those are the guys who really brought me in and introduced me to everybody. Both of them from my hometown, Yonkers.
Now, I might have missed this, but you kind of went over it pretty quickly. How do you end up working security? Who says, "Hey, Sal"?
There was a guy they knew. I mean, security in Allentown wasn't that big of a deal. I would just let the wrestlers in and out the back door and make sure nobody else came in. But whoever the guy was that was running things down there, they introduced him to me and said they needed somebody to watch the back door. That was it. Yeah, that was probably the day I started, or that looks like Hamburg, so maybe it was the next day, but I'm not sure. But when Buddy Rogers was there, that's the day I started.
Did you come across Vince McMahon Jr. during those days?
Not hearing you guys. It's tough.
Did you come across Vince McMahon Jr. in those days in the Allentown tape?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Every TV, he would be, as soon as he walked out of the building, I'd get his briefcase, bring him to his car, and he'd be on his way.
How would you describe him as a person, just from your brief time with him?
No issues whatsoever, business-like and good, but he went pretty much straight to his car. But no issues whatsoever.
Being security, anything crazy ever happen during those days?
Not there. Again, this was the 80s. It was Allentown. It was, Mel Phillips, the infamous Mel Phillips, famous Mel Phillips, whatever you want to say. This picture that you're showing here, actually, my belief is I'm the very first fan that probably got a picture of Hulk Hogan with the belt. We were in Allentown the day after Madison Square Garden. So more than likely, he got up in New York, headed straight there, and Mike DeVanzo, at this point, Dominic Marcello wasn't really coming to the events as much. Mike DeVanzo, who knew Hulk on his first run through, brought me straight to the room, and we took that picture. So it's always been my belief there really wasn't much opportunity for any fan to get a picture of him with the belt. He hadn't even had it 24 hours when that picture was taken. But the heel side in Hamburg, the fans, and you had mostly the same fans coming all the time. And there was this woman and her son. They were just horrible people and yelling at Blassie and Albano back and forth. And those guys kind of egged them on even worse and so forth. And Mel Phillips eventually, and this woman was a big hulking woman. And Mel Phillips, they eventually got into a fist fight. It was just a mess. The police came and, took her away. But other than that, when the fans got too close to George Steele, I would just say, hey, George, take a run through, would you? And they all scattered. Yeah, so there wasn't really much. It was more of making sure nobody wandered in that shouldn't, and then going to get coffee for the guys. I mean, I was an 18-year-old kid and, just coming around.
Were you a fan growing up? I mean, when you were smaller, were you a fan of wrestling?
I became a fan of wrestling in about the 10th grade. Before that, I didn't know anything about. The only reason I even started watching wrestling is the Mets were playing on the West Coast. Wrestling was going to be preempted at midnight. It was on at 5 o'clock. I didn't know that. And I was looking for baseball, and the Mets were on at 5. And WWF was on at 5. And that was it. And
Sal,
then I just started getting introduced to everybody. I put on my first show at a high school in Yonkers. Howard Finkel introduced me to Ed Cohen. Ed Cohen played a very monumental role in Vince McMahon's taking over the company, and he set me up with a charity show. I had Roddy Piper, David Schultz, and Piper, and Paul Orndorff in the main event against Rocky Johnson, Tony Atlas, and S.D. Jones. And we sold the place out. And then I had the first WrestleMania on closed circuit at Westchester Community High School in Valhalla, New York. And honestly, we didn't do good in sales the first couple of weeks. But as the New York City's venues started selling out, people were trending north. And it went from not selling any tickets to people driving us crazy day and night, and people online at 8 a.m. for a 1 o'clock show. And it was just a mess. But it was a great mess to have.
Sal, what was your cut on the closed circuit on WrestleMania 1?
I'm not sure what the question is. I think I heard closed circuit.
What was your cut, your percentage from WrestleMania 1 since you were running that event?
Again, I'm sorry. From our perspective, the arena, it was completely packed, sold out. We were running around making sure fans were set. That's the best that, from what I'm understanding you to ask me. It was a great event. We raised money for our school alumni association, Saunders High School in Yonkers, New York. So we were happy. I mean, people were being turned away, begging for tickets. I mean, there's just nothing more we could do.
So, Sal, you start off as a fan, and then you start building these relationships with these wrestlers. You brought up Mel Phillips. Was that whole situation upsetting to you as it unfolded later on in the years?
Honestly, I didn't know anything about anything. Whenever I helped out with Mel, it was during an event. I might take jackets or something like that. I didn't have any clue what was going on with anything. So it was surprising to me to hear on the back end. I was more hung around with Professor Elliot Marin, if you know that name. He was pretty involved. He was the guy, if you don't know that name, he was the guy that used to take the tapes from Allentown to Hamburg down to WOR in New York. And I mean, basically the whole company was in his hands. If he and Elliot didn't drive, never drove, could tell you how to get everywhere, but never drove a car in his life. And sometimes Mike and Dominic would drop him off. Other times he'd get other rides. But the bottom line is he was responsible for getting those tapes to WOR, and he did it.
They gave it to a guy who didn't even drive?
It
That's
doesn't
weird.
make much sense, but that's the way it was. In those days, that's the way it was.
That's crazy. So, what do you do in real life besides, we know you for the wrestling, but what's your regular job or, what do you do?
Well, since 1997, I was basically in the health club industry.
Okay.
I worked for a company called ABC Financial Services. It's now called ABC Fitness. I worked there 22 years. And I traveled the country nonstop. So when I put on the first Wrestle Reunion, I was able to combine what I was doing. Like I'd go sit down with Roddy Piper across the table and say, this is what I'd like to do. I went and sat with Buddy Rose and Colonel De Beers. This is what I want to do. If I had to meet with guys face to face, I was able to do that and always do other things. I got involved. Now this picture here that you're seeing, the guy in between me and Alpha, that's Dominic Marcello. And the guy kneeling down in the front with the beard is Mike DeVanzo. The other guy's Angelo Salvati. He was a friend of Alpha's. And this is at Alpha Jr.'s christening. But these are the two guys here, Mike DeVanzo on the bottom, Dominic Marcello up top. Those are the guys that got me in the business, introduced me to Alpha and Sika. And, from there, things really started to take off. But so I traveled the country teaching computers. Eventually got another wrestler, gorgeous Gary Royals, former NWA junior heavyweight champion. He also came to work for the company, traveled the world, teaching computers and so forth as well. And now I consult with various health clubs. One of them is actually in Northport, Revolution Fitness.
Okay.
Gentleman named Vinny DeRiso owns that. And, I've been working with him now for about 8 months. So various independent health clubs around the country. And then I do other things. I still line up appearances for people from time to time, autograph events, things like that.
Are you the originator of the wrestling meet and greet, or did you learn that from John Arezzi?
I'm sorry, am I the originator of what?
The wrestling reunions or meet.
Well, my company is Wrestle Reunion. Small, big W, big R, and that's my thing. I own it. I've owned it. I created it. The whole thing. Now that last picture you showed there, that was when we toured Australia. Jules Strongbow, cousin Luke, a local Australian girl, and then the gentleman that you probably don't recognize in the middle. That's me in the referee shirt, and that's Stephen Nichols. He's played Patch on Days of Our Lives for about, on and off for 40 years. We were on a show called The Ray Martin Show. It was a big deal in Australia. He was like the Phil Donahue, and we were all on live. We set up a wrestling ring there, and then he had just left Days of Our Lives. They were 3 years behind, so they sent him on a tour after he left the show in the States.
Sal, one of your biggest claim to fames is the Bruno book. How did that come about?
Well, to be very honest, the book was first put out over, I believe, 10 years ago in its second edition. The book was done in the 90s. It turned into a mess. It was very poorly edited. Bruno got nothing from it. And Bruno's biggest concern was that fans would show up at autograph sessions and be telling him they had to pay $100 for the book because people would see he was making an appearance. They'd throw it on eBay. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not the kind of guy that can hear the same story over and over without trying to do something if I can. So I said, you know what, Bruno, if it's all right with you, I'm going to buy a couple of these books myself. I'm going to get somebody to scan it in a computer. We're going to edit it properly, or at least way better than it is now, because the editing was very poor. And we put that book out. That's been out, I think, since 2007. And it's been, sells monthly. Then when I heard Bruno became more open in his interviews, I said, Bruno, these interviews I'm listening to, he said, well, Sal, what do you expect me to do? He said, what do you, I said, Bruno, I don't expect anything, but if this is the way you're going to talk in interviews, why don't we update the book?
There you go.
I said, let's bring it forward from the 90s and let's pull some of this nonsense out and put in the real stuff. So that's what we did. He said, sure, do whatever you want. And we spent hours and hours on the phone talking about this. And then the book was pretty much done. I had really just done the last interview with Bruno, and then shortly after he passed. And myself and J.J. Dillon and Davey O'Hannon drove down to the wake. And Carol Sammartino said, what about the book, when she saw me? And I said, well, I really haven't been pursuing it because I didn't know what direction. Things obviously weren't going well. And she said, no, I think Bruno would want you to finish the book. You need to finish it. So then I went out and got Colin Bowman. I don't know if you guys know Colin Bowman, used to be WCW Magazine. Brilliant guy that I was introduced to by Jimmy Hart. And I asked Colin if he would participate in editing it. He did. He's a huge reason for the success of the book. And, like I said, we brought it forward. It's got like 568 pages. There's a black and white. There's a color version. The real Bruno fans want the color version. It's expensive because color printing is expensive, but I've never heard a complaint. And that's how it came about. It wasn't something Bruno would have pursued. I can tell you that. He was willing to let me do it, and he spent the time going over the stories, but that was about it.
Where can fans get the Bruno book?
Amazon.com, and I think you can buy it maybe through Barnes & Noble and stuff like that, but it's placed with Amazon, and it always has been. And, it was suggested to me maybe I should pull down the old version, but the truth is the old version keeps selling. If people want it, why not?
Yeah.
But it solved the problem. Now, listen, this picture here, do you guys know who everybody in that picture is? Besides the guy in the gray jacked sweatshirt.
It looks like there's some
Rocky.
It's hard for me to see on our TV.
I can see Rocky.
Why don't you tell us?
And I see
Okay, well, from left to right, it's Rocky Johnson. That's my cousin Jim. The reason I'm not in the picture is because I'm the one taking the picture. Okay. And then you've got Alpha, and then you've got The Rock at 13 years old next to Alpha.
Right, okay, yeah, you can see it now. It's Rocky Johnson, Samoan, and Dwayne. Got it.
People can't believe that Dwayne is only 13 in that picture, but he is. I've probably known him since he was about 8.
He looks
8
20.
or 9, something like that.
It looks like he's 20.
Sal, I want to ask you this question. When Bruno passed, I was a bit surprised. Did you know he was ill, or was that a surprise to everyone?
No, it wasn't a surprise. And the calls were not being returned. It was clear that something wasn't right. And then I don't know if you know the name Blackjack Brown. That's the guy who actually introduced me to Bruno via the Gab line that they had years ago in the 90s. I was a troubleshooting referee in those days, worked different territories, went down to Puerto Rico, got involved in stuff down there, referee of the year. And so they'd have me on to help move the conversation along. And Blackjack was a good man. And Bruno didn't know me from anybody. And I guess one day he said to Blackjack, hey, this guy that you keep having on, who is he? And so from there, we made friends. And then if you know the name Joel Goodhart, Joel wanted to put together a match between David Sammartino and Larry Zbyszko for the AWA title. But he wanted Bruno to be in David's corner, and Paul Dangerously was going to be in the Zbyszko corner. Well, I intervened with Bruno to make that happen. So Bruno agreed to do this, and that was the first time I met him in person. And from there, we just took off. We had a good deal. This was when Heyman was still carrying the old white phone and so forth. And the biggest thing I always get from that is Paul wanted to get into it with Bruno, but Bruno just was interested in making the current guys shine. But he came, he did it, and things just went forward from there.
It's a real privilege to know Bruno. Could you tell the fans what kind of person was Bruno Sammartino?
A 100% class act. It was a privilege to know him. Most interviews I do, people say, "Why me?" And I don't have the slightest idea why me, other than I guess he felt he could trust me, because anybody would have wanted to be in the position that I was in with him. We did numerous appearances all over. He came down to Tampa for me, and in the winter, which Bruno didn't travel in the winter. But Wrestle Reunion 2005 was in Tampa in January, and he came. And then he had some health issues, and he came to California, which he did not want to do either. He was done traveling coast to coast, and then he got sick. The doctor told him to cancel, and before he walked in his hotel room, he looked at me. He said, "I want you to understand something. The doctor told me to cancel this trip." He said, "I told him I can't do it. Anybody else, I cancel it. I can't cancel for this guy." Now, why did I deserve that? I got no better answer for you other than I never misled the guy, never lied to the guy. And knowing him really, truly was a privilege and an honor. But I got no idea how I drew the lucky ticket.
Putting your personal feelings aside and your relationship with the legend Bruno Sammartino, did you feel that Bruno, as he got older, got jealous? And I never understood his anger with Vince McMahon Jr. Do you have any answers for this?
No, I mean, look, he had his personal feelings about how things went down, and it really, I wouldn't single out Vince McMahon Jr. necessarily. Things started back, and this is where Triple H, came into things, because without Triple H, no disrespect to anyone, I'm just being factual. Mm-hmm. And I talked to Bruno about going in the Hall of Fame many times. We had numerous discussions about it and his personal feelings. But you got to understand this. You could take this all the way back to the beginning with the Stan Hansen issue, when this thing was going bad with Inoki and Ali, and the company was in trouble. Mm-hmm. Nobody was buying the closed circuit. Bruno got himself out of the hospital bed, went down there, was promised closed circuit money, never got it. The blame was put on Bob Arum. All of these different things over the years, and then of course, Bruno did not want to get in the ring anymore. And it didn't matter if the people came to see him. That wasn't relevant to him. What was relevant is, and he even told to me, he said, "Sal, you never really saw me in my prime. But I was there when him and Tito Santana wrestled Savage and Adonis in the steel cage. In his prime or not, the people were completely out of their minds in the arena. But that wasn't what meant anything to him. But if you talk to the Honky Tonk Man, he'll tell you, they sold out everywhere they went. When I think he had to replace Jake Roberts for whatever reason. And the Honky Tonk Man will tell you, that's Umaga there on my right. And of course, Rosie on my left."
Yep.
This was at a tribute show, Yokozuna tribute show in Allentown. But, Honky Tonk Man said, basically with just a cryon across the bottom, they sold out everywhere they went. And, what I've always said is this: when Bruno lost the title and left, or gave up the title, because, he's the only guy I know of that ever gave titles up. If you saw Bruno was on a show, it was because they felt he was needed. And, I don't know any promoters sitting around looking to book somebody who really doesn't want to come if they think they're selling the place out. Nobody's looking to throw extra money away. So that's it. You got the situation where he kept getting pushed into being in the ring and he didn't want to do it. And who knows what else actually went on. So, but Vince Jr. was the only one left to have it go. And I will say, if it came down to Vince and Bruno.
Oh, that sucks.
I'm feeling like I'm frozen.
Let's see if we can get him back. That sucks.
Damn it. In the middle of some serious
rolling.
meat and potatoes.
You
What the
ain't
fuck?
kidding.
Anyway.
Sorry about that, guys.
So far,
Oh, there he is. He's
All right.
back. He's back.
All right, we lost you for a second, Sal.
Sal, continue, please. What was I saying?
Sal, you there?
I don't know if he can hear us now.
Sal, can you hear us?
Just like before, I will tell you this. I heard your commercials loud and clear, so I'm not sure what's happening. But
Sal, did you try? I know, like, Triple H does deserve the credit for finally getting Bruno and Vince on the same page. But before that, you knowing Bruno, did you ever try to say to him, come on, Bruno, make nice. Maybe you make the call. You belong in the hall. Did you have those conversations?
we had every conversation you could imagine.
Ugh.
But, everything goes the way it goes. And I think things happen the way they happen for a reason. And, sometimes when you get a cooler head, a non-emotional head, because Triple H was not involved. Now, of course, Bruno, told him everything, what he felt, but, he wasn't involved. He was a neutral party who just wanted the right thing to happen. And, I appreciated it. I very much appreciated, because I had already was bringing Bruno to an autograph event, and Triple H replaced Bruno with Steven Regal. And, the way he handled the thing was fantastic. And I did bump into Triple H for the first time. We'd never met, but I did bump into him about a month ago down here. And I told him, that it was all him, but he pretty much knew that already. I mean, it was obvious. But after that, everything was pretty much in the rearview mirror, and it worked out.
That it did. One thing our show is highly recognized for is our interview with Bruno's son, David Sammartino. May I ask you what went wrong in that relationship with Bruno and David?
Yeah, that's something I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable discussing. But look, everything isn't Leave It to Beaver. I mean, that's all I could say. And
how about it as a wrestling observer? Do you feel that David should have been given more of a push? How about if I ask you that as a fan?
Well, I mean, David worked for me a few times, I believe, and I never had any issues or concerns with him. Look, there's a lot of guys who have followed in their father's footsteps.
Okay.
Many of them didn't make it. Some,
Right.
of course, have.
Mhm.
I thought David was a good talent, and so forth. Now, how big a push was he going to get? I mean, I don't know. Was he going to headline Madison Square Garden? But part of the problem is, I think, with guys, they have an expectation they want to go higher. Well, if you don't get there, I guess it can get frustrating. But I never had any of these conversations with David. Since the last time he worked for me, I hadn't spoken with him. So, I can't tell you what's going on in his mind. What I can tell you is when he worked for me, there were no issues, no concerns whatsoever. He went in the ring, did what he had to do, and I have nothing negative to say about anything like that.
Fair enough. Do you consider Bruno the greatest wrestler of all time?
Well, that's one of these terms that it depends on what you're looking at. If you're looking at longevity, if you're looking at the same arenas over and over and over, and being able to pack those arenas many times with very weak cards because the promoter knew that the people were really coming to see you. Now, Bruno didn't like that, and he told the old man several times, he said, this is ridiculous. You've got to put more. He said, but I don't need more people. No, you're not going to cheat the fans. You're going to put better cards in the garden. It's just that simple.
Very good.
And, so if you look at that, I mean, look, the facts are facts. I mean, the guy never lost the belt. He gave it away. Matter of fact, he was going to quit and leave because his body needed to heal. Who held the belt for as long as he did in territories? And then, when he lost it the first time, well, what happened? Well, Vince and his father got in a plane, went to Pittsburgh and said, please come back. Now, can you imagine Vince McMahon getting on a plane going anywhere and asking? I mean, it's just not the way.
Yeah.
the way it goes. And why did they bring him in to begin with? He was more than happy in Toronto. He would have never called down there looking for a job. So, when you look at it from the perspective, this is in with Sergeant Slaughter. This is in the back area in Hamburg, Pennsylvania. But those are the things I look at. Now, today, of course, you have tremendous merchandising and so forth. Now, I believe Bruno, Mickey Mays, and Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle were the three highest paid athletes in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you take that money that Bruno was making in those days, somewhere 100, 110, and put it into today's money, it's not even close to what the top guys are making today. Well, why? Because of all the merchandising opportunities and all these other things. But if you're talking about being able to consistently put people in seats, he was probably the greatest attraction ever. He was there month after month after month. He was in demand everywhere he went. And keep in mind, when you think about Madison Square Garden, almost all of these guys that came in, unless it was a Harley Race or a Nick Bockwinkel, another world champion, these guys were basically put in opening matches. I don't care how hot they were in their own territory. They were put in opening matches. Anywhere Bruno went, he was brought in to be in the main event. When you look at these facts, now the greatest wrestler, well, I don't know who the greatest wrestler is, but the one that had the most longevity, the ones the fans believed in, et cetera, yeah, it's Bruno Sammartino all day long. For me, it is like the Babe Ruth of professional wrestling. But then you get into other eras. You get into a Hulk Hogan. I've known Hulk Hogan a long time. I consider him a friend. And I don't think there's anywhere on this planet you could go and Hulk Hogan not be recognized.
Mm-hmm.
For what he was able to do for this business.
Yep.
He's not a scientific wrestler to be the greatest wrestler, but he transposed the whole thing, took it into a whole another area and the revenue that came from everything. I mean, so you've got to look at that. But really and truthfully, I've thought many times that Hulk may be the most recognizable person on the planet. I mean, where do you go where somebody doesn't know who this guy is? I can't even walk down the street with Jimmy Hart without people screaming his name. Imagine walking down anywhere with
Hulk Hogan.
So, you have different eras. You have different things. Like, who was the greatest baseball player, right? Do you take somebody from the 30s? Or do you look at somebody from today?
Right.
Who knows? But for his time, Bruno was far and away the best. I mean, he never would have... If he didn't need to heal, because keep in mind, those were boxing rings they were working in, right?
Right.
They weren't wrestling. As a matter of fact, when Bruno came back and he worked in one of the rings with the springs in it, when he got in the back, he said, guys, this is a trampoline. He said, if I had a ring like this, he said, I would have been champion for 20 years.
Interesting.
That was the thing. They were in all the A shows. They were in all the B shows. If he had been given time to heal, he would have probably not been hurt. But they were working him every day. In the long run, it didn't make sense.
Sal, you built a lot of relationships with these wrestlers. Of all these relationships, which one hurt you the most when they passed?
Well, I mean, Bruno was devastating. I mean, absolutely devastating. And I think Davey O'Hannon will tell you the same thing. J.J. Dillon. I really kind of believe Bruno would outlive all of us. I think he knew he wouldn't. But for the rest of us, I mean, he just seemed to be this, unmovable thing that was there and would always be there. You're talking about, I'd spend hours each week talking to him. And so, I mean, it's a huge change in life. I mean, it really is. Obviously there's going to be other people I know, unless I die first, this is going to come up. But for the amount of time I spent with Bruno, the work I did with him, the other guys, Jimmy Hart, Stan Lane, guys that I'm extremely close to and, talk to a great deal. I mean, they're young and, or at least virile and still going strong, but Bruno was slowing down and he didn't want to travel anymore. And, I think Bruno knew where we didn't, that, things, this rheumatic fever they say you don't make it past 65 unless something kills you before. Rheumatic fever will take you by the time you're 65. But because Bruno was in such tremendous condition, he was able to last longer.
Wow. Bane fan out there asks, did you have a relationship with Larry Zbyszko?
I worked with Larry a lot over the years. So yes, Larry's one of the first wrestlers I met outside the arena. But as I became a referee, I worked with Larry a great deal, and even in the Carolinas with Jim Crockett, because Nikita Koloff got me in there. So when they came north, Philadelphia, Virginia's, so forth, and of course because I was such a huge Bruno fan, and I did a lot of the early matches, and Zbyszko really didn't get a chance to do what he could have done there. But even in places down there, everybody was screaming Bruno and Zbyszko all day long. And I would tell him the stories later when I met him, it would just be Bruno, Bruno. Eventually, Zbyszko would go out and take the microphone and say, Bruno sucks. And people just go nuts. This is 9 or 10 years after the angle.
Right.
I mean, he couldn't get away from it because it was the hottest thing there ever was.
All right, Sal, we're out of time. I want to thank you for joining us. Again, is there anything you could promote out there? I do love your gimmick of the big
right
cheese,
now,
by the way.
The book, we're happy with the way it came out. People seem to be happy with it. There's a black and white version. There's a color version for people who want to know the real Bruno. That's it. I always thank Colin Bowman for his contribution, because believe me, that made it. And the picture on the cover, the Thinker, that was Bruno's choice. He didn't give a whole lot of input other than tell the truth, but this is the picture he wanted on the cover, and this is the picture he got.
That is a great cover.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Sal, thank you again, and thanks for coming on with such short notice.
You're welcome. You guys have a great night.
Be safe.
You too. Thank you, Sal.
Well, what'd you think?
That was meaty. Meat and potatoes, talking about the good old days, the Allentown tapings, Bruno Zbyszko.
It's funny.
Good stuff.
It's funny how someone can convince, like, again, I'm not anti-Bruno, right? I was a fan of Bruno.
Oh, come on, of course.
But,
of course.
Again, I just didn't hold him as high regard as some other wrestlers.
Okay,
right?
to enhance this even further is we loved Bruno until he started screwing with Vince.
Yeah, pretty much, right.
Let's keep it simple.
Pretty much.
I agree.
Good point.
I'm with you.
But I will say this. It's funny when you meet someone that actually knew the person and you hear their insight and their feelings, it kind of makes you go,
really knew Bruno.
Maybe you just don't know,
of
right?
Course we
and
don't
you're
know.
coming to decisions that you really don't know what the truth.
Have I jumped to a conclusion?
Yeah, that's right. Jumping to conclusions.
I mean, he clearly knew Bruno very well, and he was very fortunate. Very cool.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Talk about being in the industry.
Yeah.
Anyway,
he was in the business.
He was in the business.
I wanted to ask him what Blassie and Albano and the Wizard were like.
Well, it's funny. I was going to bring up, did you know this story? And I just heard this recently. And that's why I say, try to listen to some other shows every so often. Okay. Because they've got people that you never heard of.
Right.
Like, with respect to Sal, did you know Sal?
No.
You had no idea.
He was dropping names that did
You're like, holy cow.
Who's the guy who helped Junior get going?
I'm
like, what?
That's just what I'm saying.
Very cool.
So you listen to some of these shows, when we hear about, like, the Warrior holding up Vince McMahon for money, or this, that, or the other thing, right?
Especially the other thing.
Funny thing is, did you know Zbyszko held up Senior for Shea Stadium? That's why he left. When the run got done, Senior said, "Go take a hike." I was going to ask Sal about that, but it seems like Sal wasn't around at that time.
Junior was taking notes too. Oh, you held my dad up.
Right.
See ya.
But here's the thing.
Repeated
From
with
what
Warrior.
I understand, Bruno turned to him and said, "What are you doing?"
Right.
And Larry goes, "I'm going to get mine now." And Bruno goes, "You're making a mistake. We can make money on this for years." And Larry says, "I don't care. I want my money now." He was getting a divorce. He needed his money. He ended up being okay.
Did Larry make a mistake?
I don't know. That's a good one. Did Larry make a mistake?
I'm going to have to think about that one because he had such a great
went
career.
to AWA.
No, he was great. He was great.
Got his
but-
belt,
but-
was an announcer in WCW. Not sure he made a mistake.
He had a killer career.
He did have a killer career.
Had a killer career.
So did he make a mistake? I don't know.
I don't know either because we'll never know what it would have been like if he had remained in WWF. He would have been awesome if he had remained. Don't you wish he would have?
Not really.
Why?
I don't know.
Let me tell you something. Larry Zbyszko, when he slammed that chair over Bruno's head, was the biggest heel in the business
I always
by a
felt
mile.
that
And he was such a great bad guy.
I was only getting
oh my
into
God.
it back then, but I always felt like, why didn't
That
they
was
let him
insane.
wrestle Backlund more? Like they let him beat Backlund at the Garden by count out or something.
I got to be honest. I mean, I know that they were very steadfast in their ways to keep the belt on Bob and keep the belt on Bob and keep the belt on Bob. But right away, this is the early days of my fandom. I was confused that Zbyszko didn't win the championship. He was primed and ready.
Right.
He should have.
Good stuff.
He should have won
Good
the
stuff.
championship. Bob could have taken it back eventually or something, but Larry was so hated. So hated. Oh,
Sal-
my God. And he was
ESO
world
says what
championship.
Larry could have.
Larry was
Anyway, I thought
world
Sal was
championship
wonderful.
stuff. Yeah, he was.
So glad
He
to have
was.
him on.
He was excellent.
Anyway, we want everybody to join us at 3 o'clock on Saturday. Abe will be at the board again. Did a
Abe,
great
good job, man.
Great job. By the way,
Abe's
Jared
killing it.
chimed in from Puerto Rico. He said
Jared?
he misses everybody.
Jared
Yeah.
chimed in.
Chimed in,
Spidey!
yeah. Absolute Spidey chimed
Spidey,
in.
do all the things I told you not to do.
Oh, he's having fun, man.
Spidey's killing it right
he's
now,
knocking,
I'm sure.
He's knocking boots.
I just heard Mamacita. He's having a good time.
Anyway,
Go,
we want
Spidey.
to thank you
Go,
guys,
Spidey.
as always, for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that interview. Probably could have got more from Sal, but we got to fill our time with ourselves so often.
Yeah, well, you know.
And
yeah.
anyway, we made Sal's life because he finally got to be on Monty and the Pharaoh. So, I mean, that makes a big difference, too.
I want to cover with you and me going like this.
You really like that Bruno picture.
That's a killer.
I want a picture with me in this shirt.
No, I need another pair of shades to go over these shades. That thing is bright.
All right, guys, we love you. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Jared says he's got you, Jimmy.
Jared, viva Puerto Rico. Go, Spidey, shoot the webs.
Jared's getting himself some fajitas
Jared's
right now.
shooting the webs.
He's eating some fajitas. All right, this has been Long Island's #1 pro wrestler broadcast. RJ, thank you so much.
RJ.
We'll see you on Saturday, 3 p.m. Sinister Minister and what's her name?
Max the Impaler?
There you go.
I'm frightened. You've been watching.
You're gonna get some.
Not from
Get
Max.
some.
Not from
Get
Max.
some.
Not from. I don't want to be impaled.
She's
That's your problem.
What is that?
She's what?
Abe, what is that called? Not bisexual.
What?
By gender. What is
Curious?
that?
Bicuspids?
No.
By
That's
curious?
Not bi-curious
Bi-curious?
either. Someone help me out there. From what I understand, she
Bicentennial?
is... No.
Oh,
she
that was
is
a long time
bilineal? I don't know. You know, no one's any help out there either, guys. Come on now.
Happiness.
Anyway.
No?
Send us out.
You've been watching Monty and the Pharaoh until Saturday.
Maria, we love you.
Maria. Moi. Later!